And welcome. This is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host today, Cody Williams. You haven't seen me in quite a bit. Content director for Fansided.com. Since Bueller has been covering for my sick ass for a little bit now, and while I was at the Super Bowl, I'm giving him a break today, and we're coming to you with today's episode. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to forget what number it is by the time we get to the end of this thing. That's okay. That's why we're here. But we got a good show for you today. There's actually been some college football happenings in the world over the past week or so let's get right into it. Our first and 15 today, Pat the Doc. And we're starting with Trinidad Chambliss being ruled eligible, finally, to return to Ole Miss. Obviously, this is huge for the Rebels. Trinidad Chambliss showed at the end of last season and through much of last season once he took over as the starter that he's a special talent, man. And honestly, I wonder if he personally would be better off going into the NFL draft, because when you look at this quarterback class and you look at next year's quarterback class when he's going to be another year older, it's one of those things where I think he could sneak into that conversation with Ty Simpson this year. But if you're Ole Miss, and we're just talking about the college aspect of this is huge. You're keeping Trinidad Chambliss, you're keeping Kawan Lacey. It's a very big win for the Rebels program to keep them on the right trajectory under Pete Golding and in a post-Lane Kiffin world. Now, there are still questions about Ole Miss, don't get me wrong. You had your coaching staff basically gutted by Lane Kiffin going to LSU. But, I mean, when you have a cornerstone like Trinidad Chambliss, someone who is capable of doing the things he's capable of doing, it's a big deal, man. And I I don't, in terms of like the legalese of it, in terms of why he was ruled eligible, I think he actually has a case. I think he has more of a case than someone like Diego Pavia, who got, granted an extra year of eligibility. Um, Chambliss redshirted in his first season at Ferris State. And then his second season, he played 2 games, but because of a medical issue, didn't play anymore. And that was kind of the year in question in this case. And I mean, it's not that different from a medical redshirt, if we're being completely honest. He just didn't take it at the time, but I don't hate it. Like, there are a lot of cases where it feels like, brother, just get a job, and I don't think this is necessarily one of those. I think this is a good thing for college football that he was granted an extra year of eligibility. And obviously, I think it's a good thing for Ole Miss as they try to, build off of a good run in the college football playoff this past year. So, excited to watch Chambliss play another year of college football. I thought he was one of the most fun players in college football this past year, and it's gonna be good to see him out there once again. And obviously, Ole Miss will benefit from it. In a similar regard, Joey Aguilar at Tennessee is fighting for another year of eligibility. And my thoughts on Joey Aguilar have been made quite clear. I don't think he's anything special. I understand the stats he put up. I think a lot of that has to do with Tennessee's offense, Josh Heupel's offense, and not so much Joey Aguilar, the player. I think he limits the ceiling of that offense to some degree, and we'll see, man. I do think eventually he will be granted an extra year eligibility. That kind of seems to be where the tides are leaning at this point. But regardless of if that's the case, like, I'm not sure if you're a Tennessee fan, if you should be that excited about it, quite frankly. If you're a Tennessee fan, I think you're looking at this situation almost in a case of, I mean, yes, you know that your floor is going to be quite high with Joey Aguilar. That's why I was, somewhat favorable on the move last year, but I also think it limits your ceiling. George McIntyre and I believe it's Faison Brandon, if I'm not mistaken. Both of those guys give you a higher ceiling than Joey Aguilar. I think Joey Aguilar is who he is. We're not going to see anything different from that. I don't care if it's a second year in the system. I just don't. I just don't think he is necessarily a special player. And maybe that's personal biases. And you know what? If he goes out there and tears it up, that's completely fine. But I think we're going to see Tennessee look a lot like they did this past year if Joey Aguilar returns, which again seems to be kind of where we're headed with this. So we'll see. Not the biggest fan of him as a player, not the biggest fan of the ceiling that he gives Tennessee's offense, but I understand the need for continuity or the desire for continuity. Maybe not necessarily the need. I would much rather have the variance of bringing in a young quarterback who has more talent, more upside, like a George McIntyre, than I would seeing Joey Aguilar for a second season in Knoxville. Regardless, we shall see how that plays out. But definitely some big quarterback news that we've had there, starting with Chambliss officially going back to Ole Miss. Again, for the player, I would consider the NFL draft, but for Ole Miss, it's a huge win. Huge win. And They're going to be trending in the right direction there. But let's move on to our next topic, which is Duhas for Duhas. Going to ask myself the question of the day, and it's been a hot button issue over the past week, and that is, should Alabama cancel its series with Ohio State? There's been a lot of talk about, I believe it was Paul Feinbaum, I believe, who said that Kalen DeBoer's on like shaky footing in terms of uh his standing at Alabama right now could lead to him canceling the Ohio State series. Can't think of a more small-minded, it's probably not the right word. What's the word? Like a more honestly cowardly. It'd be a cowardly move. And I've seen some people on Reddit and on social media talking about, and not to, not to disparage them solely because it's been more than this, but a lot of Texas fans being like, strength of schedule doesn't matter. It's all about the number of wins that you get. So you shouldn't play anybody. Brother, it matters. Miami won't made it to the national championship game because they played Notre Dame and beat Notre Dame. Like, let's be clear about that. That's why Miami was even in the college football playoff, was because they played Notre Dame early in the season. If they didn't have that game, if they played some Joe Schmo FCS team, if they played some, let's call it Kent State or someone like that, like Miami's not in the college football playoff, much less the national championship game. So, like, I don't think that argument really holds the weight that people think it does, because yes, a loss is penal no matter who it's to, but it is less penal if it is against a top team like an Alabama or an Ohio State. But more importantly, that win can carry you. That win can mean a whole hell of a lot. Hell, Texas was in the conversation after going 9-3. 9-3 shouldn't have you in the conversation unless you play a ridiculously good schedule. There were other 9-3 teams that weren't even remotely near the conversation, and Texas was at least like tangentially related to that conversation to get into the college football playoff at 9-3 because of the strength of schedule they played. Yeah, you lost to Ohio State, but that's still a good loss. You lost by one score. It's I don't understand the argument. I guess also I don't think I answered the question. No, Duhas two S's. They should not. Absolutely not. Like, this is one of those situations where if you want to, like, not to quote Ric Flair, but like if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And like I think that we get too prisoner of the momenty. And honestly, you want to talk about, I talked about Miami, but like you want to talk about Notre Dame. What was Notre Dame's strength of schedule outside of their losses to Miami and Texas A&M? Like, yeah, you beat USC. What other like high quality wins did you have? And like that's where Notre Dame came in. Like, we looked at it and it was like after they lost those two games, it was like, okay, but they could still go 10-2 and potentially have a chance. And they did. But like, had you scheduled a little bit more difficult, had you scheduled an Ohio State, had you scheduled an Alabama, maybe you win one of those games and that kind of pushes you over the edge, gives you the edge that you needed to get into the college football playoff and not fall behind Miami despite the head-to-head loss. So I keep looking at this, and I understand the point about DeBoer's job security. I understand the point about, why you would potentially consider canceling this series. But at the end of the day, I think it's bad for the fans, bad for the sport, and I think bad for your program, quite frankly. I think that, despite all the straw man arguments that can be made about potentially like what the downside of playing this type of series is, I think that the upside far outweighs that. And Miami just proved that. Like, Miami scheduled Notre Dame. Miami beat Notre Dame. That's the reason Miami was able to make it to a national championship game. Point blank, period. And like that's just where I come down on it. If you disagree, fine. But I think it would be quite cowardly. I think it would be a blemish on the Alabama program if they were to cancel the series for Kalen DeBoer to try to save his job. Because if there's problems with Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, they're going to show up regardless. You play in the SEC, man. Like, those problems aren't going to go away. What are you going to do? Save yourself a week? Like, it doesn't, that argument doesn't hold any water to me, quite frankly. Moving on, Kalen DeBoer won't be in the playoffs, and it's playoffs. You're kidding me. If he continues to coach like that and continues to coach scared, but we're going to talk about the Big Ten's proposal for a 2024 team playoff. And let me get this up so I get all the verbiage right. 24 team playoff, blah blah blah. All right, here's what we got. There's an internal Big Ten document circulating, and to be a 23+1 selection model. There would be no conference championship games. So basically we would get 23 at-large teams and then one G5 team guaranteed in there. Bro, this is dumb. I don't know what to tell you. This is dumb. Like it is it's weeks like I especially from the Big Ten, it seems like the Big Ten in a lot of aspects are the ones driving a lot of bad ideas, quite frankly, but I think ideas that stem from just trying to maximize revenue and basically trying to turn this into more of a business rather than a sport. And I understand it is a business. Like I understand that. Like there's a reason we see some of the things like I'm very conspiratorial when it comes to the college football playoff selection committee because I do think some of this stuff matters. Like you're not gonna if if you're splitting hairs between a decision and one's going to make you more money than the other, I suspect that the college football playoff selection committee is going to go towards the one that makes you more money. I mean, like it is a business already, but there are still aspects of the sport that matter in the current format that we have. I know expansion's coming. Expansion's going to come. Like I'm aware of that. I want that expansion to be still in the spirit of college football. This model does not seem in the spirit of college football. If you're eliminating conference championship games, that's a non-starter for me, quite frankly. I think that conference championship games, A, they drive revenue for the league. B, they drive exposure for the league. And C, I do think it should matter whether or not you win your league or not. And I don't want that decided by a tiebreaker in the regular season standings. I don't want that decided like put it this way. I'm going to liken it to college basketball. They crown a regular season champ and a conference tournament champ. Only one of those gets an automatic bid into the NCAA tournament, and that's the conference tournament champion. And I think that losing that spirit in college football, not even talking about necessarily at large bids, but I'm talking about the idea of eliminating conference championship games, of eliminating them mattering for the postseason. That's stupid. That's just stupid. That's asinine. It's a data point that you're removing. Like, let's go back to this year's college football playoff and let's go to the conference championship games. I'm not saying Alabama should have been eliminated from the college football playoff because obviously they won their first round playoff game. But we learned a lot about Alabama in that rematch against Georgia in this SEC championship game. Learned a hell of a lot. We also learned, we go to the Big Ten championship game. We learned a hell of a lot about Indiana. We learned a hell of a lot about Ohio State in that game. We learned that Indiana was for real. Lo and behold, they went and won a national championship. And we learned that Ohio State may not have been the juggernaut, may have played a bit of a soft schedule this year. And lo and behold, that played out as well when we saw them match up against Miami in the best defense that they'd seen all year, this side of Indiana. So, like, I think that losing those data points, losing the prestige of conference championship games, I think is just bad for college football. And like, I'm not saying that like, I still think that there would be conference championship games, but like losing the consequences of those games, I also think matters because I'm a proponent of if you're already in the playoff, you lose a conference championship game, you should not be penalized for that. And I stand by that because you are playing an extra data point that you earn the right to play that the other however many teams in your conference did not earn. But at the same time, I also think that having consequences of those games where whether that's an automatic berth, not necessarily an automatic bye, but an automatic berth, whether that's locking yourself into a college football playoff spot point blank period by winning the conference, like there has to be some consequence to those. Otherwise, I'm just fully against it. And maybe, I don't know, maybe the Big Ten's proposal goes through, but this feels like something to help out the Big Ten, help them get a USC, help them get ensure, say Oregon has a down year, make sure Oregon gets in there, a Michigan this past year. It just feels self-serving. And I'm sure that the SEC and Greg Sankey would be on board with some of that because it would serve them as well. Don't get me wrong. It's not just serving the Big Ten, but it does feel like it would just be heading more towards super conference football, just like having a monopoly on the sport. And that's not to say that we're not already heading there to some degree, but like it would put it more in plain black and white. And I don't want that. Doesn't mean I'm going to get my way, but I don't want that personally. Let's move on though. Let's look ahead a little bit to the 2026 season with great. You can be in our team. And that is Mark Schlabach's preseason, or way too early, excuse me, All-American team. And just kind of dissecting it. So I'm going to read off the what we got here. Excuse me, I'm still about like 85, 90% in terms of being sick. Almost back, almost back. Got way more energy than I did. The lethargy's gone, but the flu will kick your ass. Let's go ahead and tell you that. But let's go through this All-American team. Arch Manning at Texas at quarterback. Ole Miss running back Kawan Lacey at running back. The other running back spot, Ahmad Hardy at Missouri. Wide receivers, we have Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. Big surprise there, I know. And then Cam Coleman at Texas. Love the inclusion there. Tight end, Terrence Carter Jr. at Texas Tech. Tackle, Carter Smith at Indiana. Guard, Houston's Shadre Hurst. Center, Iowa's Cade Piper. At the other guard, Evan, oh God, Tingasdal. I apologize, Evan. At Cincinnati. The other tackle spot, Trevor Gooseby. I can pick some bones with that. Some nits, if you will. All-purpose Malachi Toney, Miami. Yeah, that tracks. Going to the defense, John Henry Daly, Michigan, at one of the defensive end or one of the edge spots, excuse me. Defensive tackle, AJ Holmes Jr. at Texas Tech. The other defensive tackle spot, Amari Washington at Oregon. The other edge, Colin Simmons at Texas. Whit Weeks at linebacker from LSU. Xavier Atkins at Auburn at linebacker. And the third linebacker spot, Rasheem Biles at Texas. At cornerback, we got Bryce Pollock at Texas Tech. At the other cornerback, Leonard Moore at Notre Dame. No arguments here from me. Safety, KJ Bolden at Georgia. The other safety, Coy Parrish at Oregon, transferred in from Minnesota. Special teams, Lucas Carnero at Ole Miss. We saw in the college football playoff. That's probably well deserved. Evan Crenshaw at Troy is the punter. And then Darius Clark at Kent State is the kick returner. Um, Honestly, don't have a ton of nits to pick with this, but a couple that I will get into. Um, Trevor Gooseby at Texas is the first one I want to start with. I know that's a little in the weeds talking about an offensive tackle. Trevor Gooseby's immensely talented, but we saw him really struggle this year. He did come into his own a little bit towards the end of the year, but right now this is a lot of projection for Gooseby. He is physically dominant. He is a imposing force on the offensive line, but in terms of being a top tier offensive tackle, I'm not sure he's quite there yet. He reminds me a little bit of Amarius Mims at Georgia, who was a guy who I was a big fan of coming into the draft, no doubt about it. And I'll be a fan of Gooseby because of the upside. Excuse me. But I will say that Mims did come to the NFL and was drafted by the Bengals as a not necessarily a project, but there was a lot of projection in that. Like he didn't have put forth like a pristine college career. He was not a pristine college tackle. And I think when you juxtapose that with someone like Carter Smith at Indiana, there's a big difference there. Carter Smith is a proven commodity at the college level. He is a fully realized tackle. He might not be as high of a projection as Gooseby at the NFL level, but he's a better college tackle. And if we're talking about an All-American team, I'm not projecting Jack S. Like I'm looking at what they've done. And I think that someone like Smith better encapsulates that than someone like Gooseby. Uh, in that light, looking at the, also considered Caden Green at Missouri, um, Jordan Seaton transferring from Colorado to LSU, and then Anthony Knapp at Notre Dame. Those feel like more safer bets to perform better than Gooseby at this point. I'm not saying Gooseby can't be an All-American tackle because I'm talking about how high his projection is. How high his projection is. So like if he realizes that, then yeah, he could be an All-American tackle. I'm just saying like based on what we've seen, he's not been that to this point. No real arguments with the skill positions, talking about wide receiver and running back. Did want to shout out LJ Martin at BYU and Isaac Brown at Louisville, who Schlabach also considered. Mark Fletcher Jr. at Miami. But in terms of like the highest projection, like Kawan Lacey and Ahmad Hardy, they're probably the two best running backs in the country. I'm sure people are going to push back on Arch Manning. Not me. You have Dante Moore, you have Julian Sayin as the also considered here, but like based on what we saw at the end of the season, Arch Manning was playing like one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He has, I think, a more reliable supporting cast around him. That offensive line, going back to Gooseby, should take a step forward. And yeah, man, I see Arch Manning realizing his potential this year. And Famous last words, absolutely. But I do see that. Going over the defensive side of the ball, also no problems with Malachi Toney. You got to get him on this team. All purpose makes a whole lot of sense for that. Given what he does in the return game, given what he can do on offense, Malachi Toney deserves his flowers, and he's that damn good. Um, Going to the defense, I would say that my biggest gripe I would have would be on the edge. Uh, Dylan Stewart's back at South Carolina, and him not getting the nod over a Colin Simmons doesn't really jive with me. I can't quite get there with that. Maybe Colin Simmons can realize that potential, and he's a damn good football player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to belittle any of these guys, but I'm just talking if we're like splitting hairs between these two. Dylan Stewart is a much better player than Colin Simmons right now, and has proven to be a much more better player. And I also expect South Carolina to be better than they were a year ago, so I can see that as well. Not a whole lot of not a whole lot of gripes in terms of the secondary, not a whole lot of gripes in terms of the linebacker core. I think Schlabach actually did a pretty damn good job with this. So if you want to talk about potential cornerbacks, maybe Ellis Robinson over Bryce Pollock at Texas Tech, at Georgia, Ellis Robinson. But again, Leonard Moore, I think is more than fair at Notre Dame getting one of the spots. And that second spot, I think, is going to be a little bit of a battle, but Pollock's a damn good player. So no real arguments from me there. That's going to move us on to our next segment, which is Big Ten energy. And that's kind of giving some love to Indiana's coordinators. Um, One moment, sorry. Okay, sorry, we're back. And with Big Ten energy, we're going to shout out someone who probably didn't get the love that they deserve throughout the season. That's Bryant Haines, who just won the Broyles Award. That is Indiana's defensive coordinator, in case you didn't know. And there's a chance you don't because he's kind of been the unsung hero. I know that Indiana has a lot of figureheads that got a lot of credit and deservedly so. Kurt Cignetti is a damn good football coach and a good and runs the program to perfection in Indiana. We've seen that. I mean, shows up, makes college football playoff, shows up, comes back the next year after losing pieces, doesn't just make the college football playoff again, but goes undefeated and wins a national championship. Unreal stuff. Kurt Cignetti deserves his flowers. The offense deserves its flowers. With Shanahan running the offense. The Fernando Mendoza, the playmakers on offense, they all deserve a ton of credit for what they did. Defense was lights out, man. It was lights out top to bottom. You talk about what they did in the Big Ten championship game to Ohio State. You talk about what they did to Alabama's offense in the college football playoff. You talk about how they slowed down Miami's offense in the national championship game. Like consistently, Miami's or Indiana's defense showed up, and like yes, there's NFL caliber talent on that defense. Don't get me wrong. Like D'Angelo Pons, maybe a little small, but like one of the better cornerbacks in this draft. Going to be a top 100 pick, maybe even a top 50 pick in the NFL draft. Like we're not, he wasn't doing it devoid of talent. But the job Bryant Haines did to get this group not just playing good defense for their talent level, but get them playing at a national championship level to supplement the offense. Unbelievable stuff. Fully deserving of the Broyles Award. And I think one of the biggest things that stands out to me when you look at this Indiana team is the simple fact that it's not just Kurt Cignetti. It's not just him identifying players who are established and ready to win right now. It's also this coaching staff, putting these guys in consistent positions to win. And Brian Haynes is at the top of that because if you watch Indiana's defense, whether you watch them against Alabama, you watch them against Miami. Those are two different defensive styles that you're having to play in those games. Miami can run the ball, Alabama can't. Point blank period. Ohio State, for that matter, you have a weapon laden offense when we're talking about Ohio State. A very good, accurate quarterback, but you have an offensive line that's suspect. So what do? You send pressure. You pressure up, you pressure from different angles, you pressure from different levels of the field, and you put that offensive line on its heels. And Ohio State couldn't recover from that. And like I think the way that we just saw this defense consistently adjust, not based on their own personnel, but based on the personnel that they were playing, speaks to the level of coaching that Brian Haynes is putting forth with this group. And it is immensely impressive. And it's one of the reasons why I look at this Indiana team going into next year. And yes, like I think Josh Hoover is a downgrade from Fernando Mendoza. I don't think Josh Hoover is going to win the Heisman Trophy. But I look at the way this program is being run, And I think you'd probably be pretty foolish to say that Indiana is dropping off in any meaningful capacity. They're probably going to be in the playoff mix again. And that's partially due to the guy, like the way they've been recruiting in the transfer portal and recruiting overall. But it's also partially due to the fact that Kurt Cignetti and his staff, including Bryant Haines, have this thing, they have their finger on the pulse of what they're trying to do. And I don't think that any of these groups we're going to see in Bloomington are going to be put in positions where they're being asked to do something they're not capable of doing. They're going to adjust what their personnel is good at to what the opponent is good at and what the opponent is not good at, more importantly, and continue to exploit those weaknesses. Is that going to result in undefeated seasons and national championships every year? No, it's not. Not in modern college football. There's too much parity in the sport right now. But is it going to lead Indiana to sustained success? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that like Indiana is not a flash in the pan. And their coaching staff is a big reason why to that. And Brian Haynes deserves his flowers. We're gonna finish off with one last topic, and that's Machiavellian tendencies. And just want to talk about the MAC. And Sacramento State is making the leap from FCS to FBS, and they're joining the MAC. And I know what you're thinking. Sacramento, that's in California, not in Ohio or Michigan. Yeah, you're correct. Not really geographically located in the MAC footprint, but here we are. Showing up to Akron, Ohio in the middle of November is going to be a shock, I would say, for the Sacramento State program. Going to be interesting to see. I did see a stat that this is the first California program or West Coast program, I believe it was, like between California, Washington, and Oregon to make the jump from FCS to FBS in like over 5 decades. I believe Fresno was one of the last ones to do it. Wild to consider. We'll see how it works out. I'm dubious. Sacramento State, not exactly advantageously located. Going to be in a weird recruiting spot for the MAC. That's not going to be an easy travel schedule to sell by any stretch of the imagination, but we shall see how it works out for them. I will say I do appreciate the MAC being a little bit aggressive in terms of expansion. We saw them add UMass last year, and UMass is what it is. Like, I'm not saying that's like adding Ohio State, adding, a major program or anything like that, but it is one of those things where I do think that the MAC being aggressive to expand itself and just increase its footprint. And like I do think like, UMass is less not egregious. The egregious isn't the word I'm looking for. Less drastic of a geographic expansion than Sacramento State. But it does show the MAC trying to get their footprint like a little bit wider than this Midwest region that we're normally talking about when we're talking about the MAC. And so I respect what they're doing. It's going to make MACtion even weirder, which I think is fun as a sicko college football fan. And if you're not a sicko college football fan, it's really no sweat off your back. Like, I'm of the belief we're never going to see a MAC team in the college football playoff just because the MAC is what it is. And if that's the case, and we're not going to be talking about them in like a postseason implications in terms of where they're going from here, like I do think that at the end of the day, we are talking about a conference that's thinking outside the box a little bit. And I think that's what you have to do to some degree. Um, I take a lot of shots at CUSA because I think that's a league that does the opposite of that. I think CUSA is trying to operate like it's 2000, not like it's 2026. And I'm not saying that Sacramento State is some like groundswell that's going to save the MAC or anything like that, but it does make it more interesting. It does give you, new blood in the MAC. It does give you new opponents, new matchups, and new challenges that we're going to see in college football. I'm always going to be for that. And yeah, I'm excited to see what this looks like. It's going to be weird. It's going to be funky, but excited to see what it looks like. I hope you enjoyed what this looked like. This was episode 250 something of False Start. You can follow me, Cody Williams, at the Sizzle20 on Twitter or the X. You can follow Bueller, who's getting a well-deserved break after carrying my ass for the past couple of weeks. At Bueller118. Follow the show at CFB False Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review. 5 stars on Apple, 5 stars on Spotify if you can. Give us the subscribe on YouTube. That helps out the show tremendously. Leave us a comment on any of these platforms. If you ask us a question, we will answer it. We love interacting with you guys. We don't get to do it as much as we would like to. So please interact with the show and we'll interact back, man. It's the off season, so you can ask us the dumbest thing you can possibly think of. Doesn't even have to be college football related, if we're being completely clear. That is what we do. So, like, if you want to ask a college football question, yeah, come with that. But, like, if you want to talk about fast food, love fast food. Big fan. So, we'll talk about that as well. But just leave us a comment. We'll get back to you, and we'll talk about it on the show. We love you guys. I'm glad to be back. Me and Bueller will be back together, reunited for Thursday's episode. Can't wait for that. Can't wait to talk to you guys again, because this is False Start.